Welcome to Coffee with Kupke, a production of St. Paul Inside the Walls. Here on Coffee with Kupke, we grab a cup of coffee, at least we're claiming this is coffee. We sit with Monsignor Raymond Kupke, the pastor of St. Anthony's in Hawthorne, professor at Immaculate Conception Seminary, diocesan archivist. We sit with Monsignor Kupke to delve into the history of Catholicism in the Diocese of Paterson. My name is Father Paul Manning. I am the vicar for Evangelization for the Diocese of Paterson. And here I am with Monsignor Kupke. So grab your cup of coffee and let's jump right in. I'm going to take a sip. So, Monsignor Kupke, we are approaching, I'm almost sad to say it, approaching the end of chapter 6.
You said that the last 2 episodes.
That's true. But one of the things that amazed me about this is chapter 6 is the longest chapter and a ton of information there. But I think you dedicate the largest portion, a couple of pages at least, to a priest who is, according to someone, I can't remember who, the most prominent priest to serve in New Jersey. You quoted somebody saying that.
Yeah.
And probably most of us have never heard of him.
Yeah, it's a shame that he's not better known among the clergy. He was one of the earliest priests of the Paterson Diocese to die. You know, he lived long enough to see the diocese founded and then died a few years later.
And so his name is Father Cornelius Clifford. Yeah, Cornelius Clifford, an alliterative name. Kind of sounds important.
Yeah.
So tell us about Father Cornelius Clifford. He's very interesting.
Clifford is a brilliant character who had a penchant for being at the right time, at the right place. Also had a penchant for collecting friends. And in odd ways. So he had a fascinating life. He starts out joining the Jesuits.
Well, he was born in New York City, yes?
Born in New York City,
and
yes.
was it to a prominent family, or?
No, not especially.
Was it Clifford is, what nationality is that?
Irish English,
Yeah.
He joined the Jesuits in England and left them over a sex abuse scandal.
Oh.
About 100 years before that was a topic.
Yeah.
He didn't feel the Jesuits were handling. There was something that went on in the novitiate that he didn't feel they were handling correctly, and he left.
So did he leave as a novice?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, because the Jesuits' formation was, 12 years
Right.
or something?
So, back then, there was a third way of becoming a priest. Today we have basically diocesan clergy and religious
orders, yeah.
But back then, if you had enough money, you could be ordained to your own patrimony.
My.
Which basically meant if you found a bishop to ordain you, he could ordain you as long as you were able to support yourself and not be a drag on the local
And then
diocese.
you would be like a freelance priest?
You would be like a freelancer, right?
Wow. Well, we still have some guys who get away with that, but
That's true. We could have a whole new chapter on that.
that might be a good one.
Freelancers we have known.
Yeah.
Actually, we have another nearby oratory school on Summit was originally founded by 2 of these priests.
2 freelancers.
2 freelancers.
That's a new religious community, the freelancers.
And basically in their old age, they kind of sold it to the Diocese of Newark in exchange for health benefits and retirement benefits.
Okay.
But originally, it was their school.
All right. So, did Father Clifford was he ordained as a freelancer?
As a freelancer, yes.
How did he end up in England?
I don't remember how he wound up in England.
But was he over there with the Jesuits?
Yeah.
Okay. And then leaves the Jesuits.
Yeah, he was at their novitiate in Wimbledon,
Wimbledon.
England.
Yeah. The famous one.
The famous one.
Yeah.
Everything about Clifford is always the famous because he just had a natural ability for this.
Okay.
So he gets ordained, and he roots around for a while.
Now, I'm sorry, did he get ordained in England?
No, in the United States.
So he comes back somehow.
Right. I think he got ordained in Providence, Rhode Island, without looking at
Your own
my
book.
book. Yeah. He winds up as editor for a while of the Providence Diocesan newspaper, but then ultimately winds up at Seton Hall.
Okay.
I forget who his connection was in the Newark Diocese, but he winds up in the Newark Diocese working at Seton Hall. Among his fellow staff members are, the Will Durant, the famous author,
Historian, right?
The historian, right,
Yeah.
right.
Will
He was
Durant wrote a famous history of Catholicism.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he's there. Meanwhile, again, following a little bit of the thread that we had the last time, he's got interests that are very broad-ranging. One of his grammar school classmates was the guy who engineered the Panama Canal. I mean, this is the kind of people that he knew.
Yeah.
So he becomes very interested in liturgy. And he writes several books. In particular, he writes a book on the entrance antiphons of the Roman Rite.
Entitled Introibo. I think
Introibo.
that's in the footnotes.
Right.
Introibo. That's the beginning. That's the first line of the.
That was the first line of the Old Latin Mass.
Introibo
The priest would
altare
look at the
Dei.
altar board and say, Introibo ad altare Dei.
Yeah.
Let us go up to the altar of God.
Yeah.
So this book wins the gold medal, the first gold medal from the nascent American Liturgical Art Society. So he's on the radar.
And this is that era of the liturgical movement that we talked about in the last episode. So Clifford's kind of on the
Right.
cutting edge.
Right. However, there is difficulty because he's very involved in the theological scene in Europe. And he knew one or two of the people who would ultimately be condemned as modernists
Oh boy!
during the modernism witch hunt under Pius X.
All right. So before we go there, so
If we do modernism, we're not going to get done.
well, we're going to have to do a little bit of it because Freddie and Brian in their podcast talk a little bit about modernism, but
How dare they take our material?
I know, really. So Clifford, one of the things that is obvious is that this man is a brilliant man. He studies classical languages. He teaches classical languages and philosophy. Yeah. In the meantime, he's reading on the liturgical movement, and he's involved in theological discussions in Europe.
Yes, and he's also in Rhode Island. If you've ever heard of Portsmouth Priory School, or Portsmouth Abbey School now.
Oh my gosh.
This is a very, very, this is a slightly more exclusive than Delbarton Benedictine High School in Rhode Island.
Well, this is an aside, but if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
the Healy's, a very prominent member of our diocese, Tom Healy, and his brother, Father Joe Healy, who's a Maryknoll missioner, I think they went to Portsmouth.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
Clifford is one of the founders of that school. So his library. I had to go up there and hunt down a picture of him because they have the portrait in the book that we used, and they have his entire library up there in Portsmouth Abbey.
So here's the guy who left the Jesuits, ordained as a diocesan priest.
And interestingly, Portsmouth is not part of the American Benedictine. Portsmouth is an abbey of the English Benedictine congregation.
Okay. Wow. So this guy was definitely connected all over the place.
All over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was friendly with two, what would we call them?
Yeah.
Like renegades, like
Yes.
theological renegades, or
Yeah. He is. There's the modernism thing appears not to have been what Pius X felt it was. Pius felt it was the most terrible heresy to ever hit the church because it would not stand up and identify itself, that it was a mole eating away from the inside.
And in a sentence or two, modernism was what? What did he think it was?
Basically, a rejection of everything that would be dogmatic. For example, some of the modernism tenets that he identified, we would today take as mainstream, particularly with regard to the interpretation of Scripture.
Okay.
And
development of doctrine?
That would not be
his thing.
He felt that modernism was trying to erode the ordinary faith of ordinary Catholics. And just completely take away the underpinnings of faith.
Okay.
And he was convinced of this. And when after it with a vengeance, 100 years later, we look at it and say, he appears to have been wrong in the main. Not that there was nobody who thought these things, but that it was not an organized movement in the way that he thought it was.
Okay.
But for the remainder of his pontificate, the last 10 years, it would be very dangerous to do anything that would be not by the book. To get up in a class in a seminary and speculate in Scripture, you'd be out of there by the end of the week. This is a period when seminarians would write to Rome and denounce their professors, and they would be removed. It was the most difficult job you could have at this point was to be a rector or a Scripture professor in a seminary. It basically held Catholic scholars out of the biblical movement for like 30, 40 years.
Right.
And
at some point, an oath against modernism becomes mandatory for priests. And
priests taking positions, right? If you became a pastor, a vicar general, a seminary professor, you didn't have to renounce Arianism, Nestorianism, but you did have to renounce modernism.
And that held for a long, long time, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's in this that Clifford is at Seton Hall. And he wrote a book review in some theological journal on one of the books written by one of the ones suspected by modernism. And this made, I guess it's Bishop O'Connor.
Yes.
Very, very nervous, that this was going to bring the gaze of Rome onto the Newark diocese. And, nothing good could come of this. If they were going to look at you in an investigative way, they were going to find something, even if it wasn't there.
So he moved him, didn't he? Quickly got him out of the seminary or something?
A midnight move, yes, out of the seminary.
It was Clifford and somebody else you mentioned. I don't remember.
Yeah. But Clifford is made the resident pastor of Our Lady of Mercy in Whippany. They didn't have a residence in Whippany. There's evidence in the archives that when Clifford died, we had to buy the rectory from his estate because he was pushed up there so quickly that there was no house.
So
there was no rectory.
Did he buy his own rectory?
Apparently, yes.
And is it the current rectory?
Yeah.
Which is a historic-looking building.
Yeah. So he is put in the most obscure little place they can think of, the most obscure place that was available at a moment's notice.
Yes.
They put him there.
So
they make Whippany a parish to hide Clifford.
Oh, wow. And so,
he's not hidden easily.
Okay.
Because he's so brilliant. So for the next 20, 30 years, he is a devoted pastor of this small rural parish in Whippany.
So Whippany was rural still at this point?
Yes, farms, you know.
And is it the little church
and
that's
the
there?
paper mill, the little church, right?
Right.
So, if you talk to older families in Whippany, they will still speak of him very fondly. But meanwhile, while he's doing that, he has this other life.
Okay.
He is teaching in the Columbia University Graduate School of Philosophy.
Wow.
Running over from Whippany to Manhattan. Cardinal Hayes of New York asked him to represent the Catholics in a public debate with Margaret Sanger, the founder of the birth control movement. So he's got these two lives, this very, very public one, and then this very pastoral one in Whippany.
So Cardinal Hayes was not as concerned about modernism?
By that point, Pius X was dead.
Oh, okay.
We can move on.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But meanwhile, in Whippany, he is turning this little country parish into a model of liturgical practice.
Wow.
Whippany was on the liturgical map in a way that it has never been, or any other of our parishes have ever been since. We have a picture in my book there of him doing an entrance procession at a regular Sunday Mass. He had done this study on the entrance rites of the Catholic. So he was doing the entrance procession before that ever even came up. 40 years ahead of the time.
There was no entrance procession before?
No, you just walked out of the sacristy, genuflected, and went up and started saying Mass.
So he starts this in, what year are we talking around?
The 1930s, 1920s.
Amazing.
Yeah. And has a trained choir in the chants of the, he became so famous that Catholics of a certain interest and quality, if you will, would purposely travel from the city to go to Mass in Whippany just to see what he was up to. His Masses, as Our Lady of Mercy began to attract President Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, we know, was out there attending Mass.
And this is that original church is very small, isn't it?
Yeah, very small, right.
Interesting.
Yeah, the picture, I think, is,
There it is, yeah. It's on, if you have the book, it's on page 213, the entrance procession outside going into church. Yeah. So he's at the forefront.
So when he dies, I think he died in 1939. The church is too small for the funeral. There are so many famous people coming to the funeral. There were two Nobel Prize winners at his funeral.
And they were?
I don't remember.
Carol? Carol?
Alexis Carrel. Right.
Yeah.
And I forget the other one.
Yeah, and Carrel is an author? Was he an author? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they have the funeral at Assumption in Morristown because the church in Whippany is too small to hold everybody that wants to come.
Yeah, you said that he had his parishioners making vestments, like he even the vesture.
Yeah, if you look at the picture there.
I feel sorry that the people who are listening can't see
this was not what most people were wearing.
Oh, so
in 1939.
In 1939, they
it
would
was
have
still
been
the fiddleback Rome, but he was wearing Gothic,
Interesting. So you don't see the picture, but the fiddleback vestment that would have been worn at this time was kind of
an abbreviated
inflexible
form of the
and it was like
cardboard, very stiff.
Yeah, stiff. And here he is in
this flowing Gothic chasuble.
A Gothic chasuble that's more like
which
what we're used to.
Which was just beginning to be
rediscovered.
Rediscovered.
Yeah. And so the ladies in the parish would make this. Yeah.
He took this little country place of exile, if you will, and turned it into a center of liturgical.
Yeah, so you have this erudite intellectual,
Right.
and yet
Very pastoral.
yeah. And I wonder if how he was communicating. He must have had a knack for not simplifying, right? Or communicating in a way that was
understandable and
Yeah,
approachable
yeah.
for his congregation.
in some ways
Yeah.
like Pope Benedict.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Just the last thing, because we're just about out of time. But is there anybody since Clifford that reminds you of him? Somebody who's got that.
Well, there's you and me.
Oh, thank you. I forgot about us. Anybody else? Like somebody who's got that academic bent, but who kind of has the pastoral touch. I'm just trying to think in our diocese or even somebody who has continued that liturgical emphasis.
I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, because I know we've had folks who have been very interested in the liturgy. You know, right
Yes.
now we have Father Jared Brogan, who's now the director of our
Brogan,
Office
yeah,
of Worship.
and
Yeah.
some of the monks at St. Mary's Abbey have.
Yes. Oh, so Beatus Lucy.
Right.
We'll end with Beatus Lucy. You mentioned Beatus Lucy, and who was Beatus Lucy?
Beatus is a monk of St. Mary's Abbey.
Oh, still alive.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay,
I
sorry.
think recently.
Yeah.
But when St. Mary's built the current church, he was the chairman of the internal liturgy committee of the Abbey.
Okay.
That came up with that design and worked with the architect to create that.
That very unique building.
Yeah, and it's an interesting building because it is a true theological kind of head trip. It's not always appreciated at first look. It isn't until somebody like Beatus explains to you the theological meaning
Yes.
of the difference in the pavement from the outer part of the thing into the. Then all of a sudden you begin to see all the theological reflection that went into that building.
And when was it built?
It's interesting. In the Catholic Advocate, which was the newspaper at the time for Newark and Paterson, the design for that church is featured in the same article that covered the assassination of President Kennedy.
Oh, so it's
Early 60s.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a result of the liturgical movement prior to
Yeah,
Vatican II.
right.
Yeah. So next time we get together, I think we are going to return to weird Diocese of New Jersey. We only got to 3 items last time, so maybe we'll do the next 3 shortly. So stay tuned. Let's leave it there. I want all of you who are listening or watching to make sure that you keep an eye out or an ear out for the next episode of Coffee with Kupke. In order to stay on top of new releases, make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And if you are on YouTube, please do drop a like and hit the bell for notifications. While you're at it, make sure to check out the other shows produced by the diocese. Those shows are Beyond the Beacon, hosted by Bishop Kevin Sweeney and Jay Agnish, our Director of Communications, and the Paul Street Journal, hosted by Brian Hansberger and Freddie Garcia. I want to give a special thanks to Joe Ginexi, our sound and visual engineer, Caitlin Ferrari, who's involved in pre- and post-production, and Freddie Garcia, who's helping out with this podcast in addition to doing his own. With all that said, I just want to thank you for joining us in Coffee with Kupke. Keep making Catholic history in the Diocese of Paterson.